Curse of Strahd, Part 7, Chapter 7, Argynvostholt. This adventure is essentially a half-ruined manor named after a dead silver dragon. This manor is 3 stories tall with a roof section as well. You'll notice the downstairs here. Here's the ruined segment. Here's the first upper story. There are some areas here that are left blank because they're open to the downstairs. And then here we get the 3rd floor with some open areas downstairs, lots of rubble, broken rooms with really nothing in them. And finally, the roof and these little towers over here. And finally, the pinnacle of this particular tower. And all this wreckage as well. This adventure takes place roughly to the west of Vallaki. Now, it's made for characters somewhere on the range of levels 4 and 5. Your player characters don't need to be a specific level for it. It's one of those locations that the player characters will see this broken manor in the distance, maybe from the road, which looks rather half destroyed and creepy looking. They don't have to explore it unless they've have some clue that perhaps one of the treasures can be found in that location, such as something from the Taroka deck here. Or it could just be a side adventure that the player characters or side location that your player characters explore and get to enjoy the fun of exploring a ruined manor while adventuring around Barovia. Now, the adventure deals with, well, the remnant of Argynvostholt, or the fact that this silver dragon named Argynvostholt once had this manor and, well, once was the lord of this manor and commanded a group of knights who, during Strahd's life, fought against Strahd. Eventually, these knights were killed, of course, and eventually these knights fought and slew Argynvostholt as well, and then Strahd pillaged his corpse and brought his skull back to Castle Ravenloft, where it currently remains. Now, as you're going through the adventure, I'll note the main enemies in this particular adventure are revenants, and they are the remnants of those knights, several of them, I should say. In this case, in Barovia, these revenants, when they die, simply find another body somewhere based on this random roll in this chart, somewhere in Barovia, as when they die, their souls don't move on. They're trapped in Barovia like everyone else. Now, there are ways of putting their souls at rest, of course, but it's up to the player character's actions to do that, and the player characters won't know that, of course. Now, of course, as you approach the mansion, you get this description. And in fact, even if your player characters are just kind of in the area, like say north of the manor on the road, they might be given this description or some segment of it, as it's an interesting, haunted, half ruined manor up on a hill, which, your player characters might check out. Your players might also say, nope, we don't want to go near that old ruin. And they can just avoid it, and your campaign will be just fine. It is really just a side adventure for the most part. Now, again, you get the maps here in this listing on 5e Tools. You get the different areas, which are, of course, broken down with queue numbers, Q1, Q2, Q3, and all that. The different rooms and all that, and entrances and whatnot. You get the foyer and, the shadow of Argynvost and all that, and just different things that are different effects and different locations, different descriptions. It's kind of standard stuff in this case. Some of the enemies you'll find within this ruin are several sets of giant spiders. You get a dusk elf who is alive. His name is Savid, and he is out from the Vistani camp outside of Vallaki village, searching for the missing Vistani girl, Arabelle. And he's a source of information as he's more neutrally aligned. Now, as you go through more of this adventure, you get more description, of course, and all that. There are a couple of minor traps in the adventure, some minor stuff like a bat in a pot, things like that. It's real basic stuff. Here's where you get actually Savid and some of the information he knows, which I won't go into detail with, but You can use it if player characters encounter him, as it's a great little role playing segment. It's a small role playing segment that the player characters can come across. Like many of the segments in Under Mountain and different chapters, you get some really great description of different rooms and what the player characters will find there, which is one of the stronger points of this adventure and the campaign in general. You get more Revenants, and there were three of them in the Chapel of the Morning, which is, of course, a former chapel of the Morning Lord. Now, three Revenants for a group of fourth or fifth level characters, you can see what they're worth in XP, is going to be a very tough fight, especially if there are other Revenants in the area, hear about the battle, and come downstairs or into the area to join in. These Revenants at fourth level or even third level will probably kill the player characters or will give them a serious run for their money, and those player characters might have to flee. Again, if they're fifth level, they might be able to handle this fight, especially if they've rested recently. If they're sixth level, they'll probably be able to handle this adventure or this segment with no problems. It really just depends on a lot of factors. I would not tell your player characters they need to be here at fifth or sixth level. Just let them go into the manor at whatever level they want. And if they encounter this fight, let them learn whether or not they should continue to fight these people. You don't want player characters that think they're invulnerable and just, attack everything. They have to understand that, like, there are enemies that are going to be quite dangerous. And if they don't run or withdraw or do something, they could be destroyed in this case, especially. Now, as you're going into further areas of the adventure, they go into the cemetery, the chapel. There's this dragon mausoleum. Again, these are very descriptive areas. There's this little poem that's carved into the mausoleum. Here lies the bones and treasures of Argynvostholt, Lord of Argynvostholt, and the founder of the Order of the Silver Dragon. Just neat little details that make this little sub adventure a little more interesting as the player characters are going through it. And you get more description, little areas. You get the bathroom, this is actually a really nice touch. So many old adventures, there's no bathrooms or privies, well, except for Under Mountain for some reason. They always added some little details like that make sense because DMs back in the day never thought about why why a building looked like this, why certain rooms tend to be in certain areas, where are the bathrooms in this particular dungeon crawl or whatever. That's just one of those things that you shouldn't overlook in dungeon design. Chapels, trapped hallways, things like that, guest rooms. You finally get to the roof. One of the things you get here, you also get a smoke method at one point, but you also get phantom warriors, which are a unique creature from Curse of Strahd, which are not really ghosts, but they're definitely spirits. But they stand out as they are most prominently featured in this particular part of the adventure. Although I do believe they have an appearance in Castle Ravenloft as well. You can see here they are worth about 700 XP, challenge rating 3. They're not for low level enemies, super low level enemies. I mean, second and third level characters could deal with them. Anything like after that, and they become a little easy and just kind of like a extra threat that's kind of lingering around the area. But still, it's nice to see kind of any unusual and unique creatures to be found here. Finally, as you're kind of going through the adventure more and more, you eventually encounter the leader of the Knights of the Silver Dragon, who is Vladimir Horngard. He is essentially the lead Revenant who turned to darkness after Strahd turned into a vampire, and he can't leave and rest, but he is more or less acting against Strahd within Strahd's own land. Strahd can't get rid of him permanently because he's just going to find another body and come back. He's just kind of a thorn in Strahd's side. He could theoretically aid the player characters against Strahd if they figured out his motivations, as he does want to see Strahd defeated or destroyed, especially because then he might be able to actually rest. What I find interesting is, if you note, he has a +2 great sword with a hilt sculpted to resemble a silver dragon wings, and a pommel shaped like a silver dragon's head clutching a black opal between its teeth. Nice description, but also I like that they included this weapon in his stat blocks, including all its bonuses to hit and damage rolls. They don't do this enough in 5th edition. This is something I do with my campaigns, whenever there's a fun item, it's not necessarily just found in a random treasure chest or rolled at random. It's something that like a big boss enemy might actually have, or if you want to really surprise player characters, just give an item like that to some random guy and or some lower level guy who just happens to have it. In this case, it makes a lot of sense. It's a great treasure item that the player characters might find if they go here and clear this place out. Of course, it depends whether you have a player character that wants to fight with a +2 greatsword in your campaign. It might be one of those items where a player, like in my campaign, where they say, "Oh, what a cool item," but none of us fight with a greatsword, and no one wants to change the way their character fight for this weapon, despite being a great item. But you never know. I wouldn't change the item if it's a situation like that to something else. Like, let them take what they can find while they're in Barovia. Some items will not be perfect. Now, again, you get more descriptions, descriptions as they go into different rooms, especially when they encounter Vladimir Horngard and all that. There is the possibility that a number of the fortunes from the Petroka deck do pay off here. In this case, an item that Vladimir might actually have on him, such as the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind, or he might actually have the Sunblade, or maybe one of his Revenants has the Sunblade, that would be quite odd if they tried using it. There are some other Revenants here and all that. There are quite a few of them. One of them, interesting enough, is this fellow right here, Sir Godfrey Gwillem. What a wonderfully Welsh name, in fact. And he, unlike the other Revenants, is essentially a spellcaster and has a different challenge rating. He has his list of spells, and he's just a variant of the Revenants. And I like that they included a nice little variant here, which is a surprising twist. You don't really get that many variations in 5th edition, whereas 3rd edition, everything was variation. Now, as you get near the end, you get the other possibility of another Fortune of Ravenloft card also being here. You get more bedrooms, more stuff. You get a nice little journal page that can be found, and there's an entry here, and you can hand the entry to the player characters. And I like that they managed to transfer it, so if your player characters cannot read the handwriting, which not everyone can, you can just show them the text if you need to, but it's nice that you can hand them this little extra handout and all that. There's slash pictures, more descriptive rooms, a little bit of poetry thrown in later on as well, more poetry, and just the different roofs and towers and all that as the player characters are exploring the whole place, and a few more minor threats as they're going through the adventure. And again, another location where you could find a Fortune of Ravenloft. So there's a good reason for the player characters to come here, but unless the fortunes are in the area and the player characters haven't found them, they don't actually have to go to this location. Although I would recommend it, it is very interesting. Now, in addition, 3 other things. If the player characters ever go back or ever go to Castle Ravenloft and they bring back the skull of the actual Argynvost and place it in the dragon's mausoleum where it belongs, this transforms the dragon spirit into a brilliant light that fills the room and flashes the valley and the beacon, sort of like a lighthouse. When this is cast, it shines all over Barovia, although it can be seen from Castle Ravenloft. It doesn't affect much or at Castle Ravenloft. For the most part, if the player characters do this, it essentially gives them a +1 bonus to AC and saving throws as long as they're enemies of Strahd and remain in Barovia. This is a very interesting consequence for player characters doing the right thing, or at least getting the skull back where it belongs, and it can be very beneficial for the player characters going forward. Of course, they won't know this, but the DM, you being the DM or whoever is DMing, should imply this sort of thing. This also notes where you can see the light from basically most places, even the Werewolf Den, even all the way in, I don't know if you can see it in Barovia Village. In fact, I guess you can't see it there. But you can see it in most places in Barovia if you do that, or if the player characters do that. Now, lastly, there's 2 special events tied in here, one of which, special delivery, a Vistana named Koya arrives, and she basically, or he, comes to the front of the manor and, relieves himself on the statue of Argynvost, untethers his horse, and leaves the wagon with a coffin in the back. in front of the house for the player characters to find. The name of the coffin, or the name carved in the coffin, is a random player character. This is meant to be a creepy thing to do. And there's a swarm of bats within. My recommendation here is, instead of the swarm of bats being essentially a swarm of bats and an annoying little random encounter, if they opened it up, have the bats swarm out and have them be like a necrotic swarm of bats, where instead of having to attack and fight them, the player characters have to make a saving throw. You could treat it like a glyph of warding that does necrotic damage or something like that, and it works the same way. There's no point in a really ridiculous, 20 XP fight or whatever this is, 50 XP fight. If the player characters are fourth or fifth level, it's just kind of a little extra thing. There's also Aragol's Hunt. Now, I'd recommend doing one or the other. If you do both, it seems kind of redundant. You could use Aragol's Hunt later, or you could do Special Delivery later if you want. Both are great little things that the player characters can counter, and they both deal with the Vistani. And essentially, Esmeralda de Avenir is a member of the Vistani who is good aligned and is arriving here, and she's being chased by, like, what is his name again? His name is Aragol. Aragol, who is a notable evil member of the Vistani, who is trying to punish her for horse theft. And, he's not doing this despite the player characters. He's dealing with Esmeralda, and it's kind of a personal affair. But the player characters can get involved, and they would then meet Esmeralda, who could be a powerful ally for the campaign. Now, just extra things I'd recommend, like use them one or the other, or use the other one down the line at a different location. They are quite useful, and interesting, surprising twists and things that happen. It makes this location feel a little bit more alive as events are taking place. It's not just the player characters going to different locations within this location. There are things happening at this location or around this location. And my only recommendation with this adventure is, it might be interesting to have the player characters at some point fight a living statue of, say, the dragon as a wormling. And that could be, believe there is some statue stats you can find if you look around in 5e tools or different books. The other suggestion I'd make is, there is the stats for a ghost dragon, which it's, forget which book it's called. It's one of the newer books, newer monsters manual books dealing with dragons, and it's a great set of stats, and you can actually use it for the ghost of the dragon itself, which can be found somewhere in the manor. The dragon does have a presence, its spirit, but you might as well, since those stats exist, bring those stats into this adventure. And the dragon is good aligned, keep in mind. So they won't know necessarily that the ghost of the dragon is more or less here to help and is an enemy of Strahd. They could fight the spirit of the ghost of the dragon and then realize mid battle that the ghost is more or less on their side, or say the dragon ghost notices one of their holy symbols, or they say the right thing. Who knows? It could happen, and it would be just an extra little thing you can add in there. I would also throw in things like maybe an animated table or an animated broom and sword in one particular room would fit nicely in just some random back alley room or back room, or perhaps a closet full of animated brooms that swarm out at the player characters. These are just extra little ideas you can throw in there. Something like that. Or maybe there's a Vargul trapped in that closet too, wearing a dread helm, the most worthless magic item ever, but they're very common. Steal these ideas from me if you like. Just little extra things sometimes kind of flesh out an adventure and make it feel a little bit more real, and gives the player characters a few extra surprises. Now, guys, I'd rate this adventure, even though it's a side quest, as a 5 out of 5. It's an excellent example of what a side quest adventure could be and can be. And again, especially for a location the player characters do not necessarily have to go to, it's utterly fantastic. And it really helps make this campaign, Curse of Strahd, even better than it even has to be. Now, if you like my videos and you want to see more of them, please like and subscribe these videos, or to these videos, and follow me if you'd like. And if you want to check out my Patreon and follow me on there and support me, it's much appreciated. Stay tuned for the next one.